Good evening. This is the Tuesday, May 27, 2025 meeting of the Town of South Windsor Planning and Zoning Commission. We'll rise to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, remember your phones, please silence them. And we'll ask the secretary to read the public notice.
Notice is hereby given that there will be a public hearing on Tuesday, May 27th, 2025 at 7 p.m. in the council chambers of the South Windsor Town Hall to consider the following. Application 25-17P, Down East Design Commercial Zone Overlay Text Amendment. This is a request by Down East LLC to add section 5.11 Buckland Gateway South Overlay Zone to create a new overlay zone applicable only to the designed commercial zone. Establish minimum bulk requirements for a minimum 35 acres for an age-restricted residential development not to exceed 4.5 units per acre with 15% deed-restricted affordable units. Modify section 4.3 Design Commercial Zone to change acreage requirements, add separating distances from roads and site and design criteria and requirements for residential and retail uses. Modify the use table 4.1.1a to include a memory care facility. Modify table 4.1.6a to establish bulk requirements for commercial lots, including an 8-acre minimum, and modify 7.11.2 for minor home occupations. Copies of the applications are on file in the office of the town clerk and or the planning department and online at southwindsor-ct.gov. At this hearing, interested persons may be heard and written comments by the public will be received by mail or email. Persons who may require an accommodation can contact staff at 860-644-2511, extension 2329. Stephen Wagner, Chair, Planning and Zoning Commission.
I think everyone here is familiar with our procedure for public hearings, so we'll proceed to hear from the applicant.
Good evening, Chair, members of the Commission. There we go. For the record, my name is Don Poland. I'm with the firm of Gilman York Property Advisors based in East Hartford, Connecticut, and here tonight on behalf of Down East LLC. You received from us a proposed draft of the text amendment. You also received the supplemental materials. I'm going to run through the draft amendment first with a very kind of high-level overview, and then I'll touch on some of the stuff from the supplemental review. The process that we went through with the committee resulted in kind of multiple tries at a zoning regulation, and we started off down the road initially with an overlay zone. We then shifted to a redesigned DC zone, and then we shifted back again to an overlay zone. At the end of the day, I think the overlay zone is the best approach to this property. So in drafting it with the direction of the committee members and also with the direction of the staff, we tried to draft this overlay zone to be as similar as possible, at least in the context of provisions within it, to other zones already within your community, and tried to stay true to the spirit of those things. So I just want to go through and just highlight some things in it. So the permitted use section 5.11.2, the BGS zone would only be available for age-restricted housing 55 years and older. So there are no other uses associated with this other than, customary accessory uses. In addition, there is a specific provision that limits the 55 and older communities that there shall be no persons under the age of 18 years of age. And this is to make sure that we clearly address the concerns over school-age children and potential impacts to the school district. The density or the acreage for the site, as John has already introduced to you, kind of as conceptualized as we were looking at different ways to go about this, a 10-acre carve-out for that corner of Pleasant Valley and Wheeler is what was created and kind of conceptualized. But in section 5.11.3, subsection A, subsection 1, the BG zone is a minimum of 35 acres. BGS zone is a minimum of 35 acres and a maximum of 47. It's that max of 47 being a 57-acre parcel that we came up with the 10 acres. But I just want to be clear that it could be more than 10 acres. That is a possibility in the context of how it's written. The types of units allowed shall be single-family detached, single-family attached, and no more than 6 units per building. So this would not be a garden-style development. It would be a townhouse-style development, most likely with a mix of buildings with between 1 and 6 units in them. Sorry, that's section 5.11.4, subsection A, subsection 1. And then that's followed by then the minimum lot standards, which are pretty standard, I think, in comparison to other zones. 400 feet of frontage to be defined on Wheeler Road. That is to stay away from Pleasant Valley, leaving Pleasant Valley available ultimately for the commercial development. Minimum lot depth, 200 feet, minimum front yard, 50 feet, minimum rear yard, and side yards at 50 feet. That comes into play when we get to the buffer requirement, so I just wanted to note that here. I'll come back to mentioning the yard setbacks. Maximum of 3 stories and a maximum of 40 feet and a maximum impervious coverage of 45%. Once again, staying consistent with other provisions within your regulations, making sure that this is not, the entire parcel would not be covered over with impervious surfaces, that there's ample space for green space. As drafted, it says a 15-foot minimum setback between buildings. I believe your staff is going to have a recommendation for a change to that, which we are fine with. Also, it requires the development to be a common interest community. This is in 5.11.5, form of ownership. And then extensive site design requirements. That's section 5.11.6, site design requirements. Under the general standards item, which is B, item 2, 600 square feet of open space per unit is required on the site, so we're maintaining large amounts of open space. In addition, if you go down to item 3, amenities, there would be a requirement for a clubhouse and other amenities, and the amenity space shall be a minimum of 2,000 square feet or 1,500 square feet per unit. I think based on the conceptuals that were being played around with, if this were, say, give or take, 200 units, you'd probably be looking at 4,000 to 5,000 square feet in that amenity space provision. The 2,000 just makes sure that you get something, so. Moving on to sub-items 6 there is parking, and it's 1.75 parking spaces per unit with 0.25 parking spaces per unit for visitor parking. So basically you end up with 2 spaces per unit across the development. The units would be designed in the context of the parking spaces with wiring to accommodate electric vehicles. This is not the full install of the charging system, but that the wiring would actually be there and available to the parking locations. Skipping down to subsection 9, everything else in between there and here I think is pretty standard. A lot of it deals with infrastructure and so forth. Section 9 is the buffer requirements, and we have submitted, after talking with staff, and I believe you guys received it tonight, we have submitted alternative language or modified language for that section. Remember, in the context of a zone change application, a text amendment, you have the ability to approve, modify, and deny, or deny. So modifications can occur through the public hearing process. So we submitted this. This was to address, Michelle had raised concerns with me related to how I worded the buffers. And at which point I realized I had kind of lost track of something along the way and so forth. So we wanted to provide clearer language to address this. So essentially now, in section 6.2.4, which is your buffer requirements, there is a table, 6.2.4a, which breaks out the buffer requirements by the type of zone and uses and so forth. And there is a section in there that specifically addresses multifamily and elderly housing. So we tied the buffer requirements to that section at 25 feet around the perimeter. However, that's where I said I would come back to the setback requirements. The buffer requirement of 25 feet is in addition to those 50-foot setbacks that are established in the buffer requirement. So essentially you would end up with 75 feet of area between the structures and the property lines around the property. And the 25-foot area would have to comply with then the design of a buffer being installed. So I just wanted to provide clarity on that. And then we had discussed with the committee how to deal with the buffer between, if say the 10-acre parcel were cut out, or if there's a remaining 10-acre parcel that would be commercial. The way that table 6.2.4a reads, currently the DC zone has a 100-foot buffer on it. So you would have 100 feet plus 25 feet plus setbacks. 25 feet in the BSG plus setbacks. So we put in here clarifying language that the buffer on that DC zoned remaining parcel, if the BGS comes into existence, would be 25 feet plus the setback as it's already interpreted. What we're trying to avoid there, if you did a 100-foot buffer plus the DC zone setback, and you only have a 10-acre parcel, you would actually lose a substantial amount of the parcel from development, and recognizing that that parcel is to remain for commercial purposes, we kind of assume that you'd probably want a higher yield out of it. So ultimately, we clarified that provision with the DC zone. Sorry, my pages are out of order here. Okay. There is a phasing provision. There are extensive design requirements that are based on existing design requirements from, I believe, your Buckland Gateway zone is where we lifted that from. And then there is affordable housing requirement. I know we debated this the last time around, and this time it is the 15%, as I believe you guys wished for it to be. That 15% of the units would be affordable. And then the application procedures for how someone would apply for the BGS, and it essentially follows the same procedures that you now use for your master plan developments. So it would be a master plan along with the zoning map amendment to establish the BGS zone. So you get to see what the development is along with the zone change. And then once approved, it would then be site plan special permit under your current site plan special permit requirements for the actual development application. So you guys get two ups at bat on the application. One, the master plan and the zone change, and then followed by the site plan and special permit. That being said, from an application process perspective, an applicant could submit master plan zone change and site plan special permit or special exception all at the same time. You hearing the zone change master plan first, the site plan special exception second, and they could run congruently through the process. But theoretically, it is a two-step process with the zone change and master plan coming first. There are then proposed amendments to your use table, table 4.1.1.a, permitted commercial industrial uses. These were aimed primarily at the DC zone and cleaning up maybe some of the more less desirable uses that were expressed by the Smith Street residents as we went through this process. In that we did offer, we did provide an added new use in the DC zone that would be for a memory care facility as a potential commercial use for the carve-out parcel at the corner of Pleasant and Wheeler. We then removed automotive fuel uses from the DC zone. We also removed convention facilities from the DC zone. Neither one of those we think are going to happen there anyways, but they were kind of concern. And just so you know, my papers aren't usually this sloppy. My staple gave way. So, and then there's amendments to table 4.1.6a. That's on page, I think, 15 if your numbering's the same, which is the density requirements, bulk area and density requirements for the various zones. A change in the minimum lot size in the DC zone to 8 acres rather than the existing 30. Michelle, there is something that I caught here. If you have the table in front of you, if you go over to the rear yard setback in the DC zone, Somehow, something's been deleted, but I did not provide an alternative number there. So as we're thinking about modified language, that may have to be cleaned up. So I just
Our
want to
copy
make that.
shows 20.
Huh? Just so you guys know, a formal application package was submitted and posted. When we were finally sending it out to the commission, staff asked me to, because it had red and blue text, staff asked me to provide a redlined document, and I just noticed when I provided that redlined document, it dropped the 20 that's supposed to be there in that column. So I'm looking at the redline document, and I'm missing the 20, so my apologies. If anyone else has the same missing, it's actually 20, so my apologies on that. And then there were some proposed amendments to the DC zone itself, and they were essentially cleanups to make sure that the DC zone continued to function and work. So on the first page, page 17, or section 4.3, subsection B, subsection 1, you'll notice the 30 acres is deleted and 8 acres is added. You know, we're making those editorial corrections to make sure that it matches with those changes we did to the table. In 4.3B2, which is the minimum landscaping and open space uses, it's then subsection A is parking, and then there's section 3, open space. In the open space requirements, there is a line added in the event the BGS overlay zone. In the event of the BGS overlay zone, the open space requirements shall be met in the BGS zone. We didn't want to, once again, we didn't want to place the open space burden on the DC zone carve-out parcel because we didn't want to minimize yield on that, just as I said with the buffers. And then subsection 8, utilities, sewer, water, fire protection, storm drainage. There's a subsection C for buffer areas. Item 2, uses in the DC zone shall maintain 200 feet, my apologies, from Smith Street and 200 feet from the side and rear property lines of residential properties on Smith Street. Let me explain this. The Smith Street residents expressed substantial concerns about commercial development in the DC zone. I think they made it pretty clear through the process that they didn't want to see commercial development there. So this change to the DC zone is essentially a safeguard. If the BGS never happens, if the age-restricted housing development never materializes, and someone comes in to develop the parcel under the DC zone, the entire parcel under the DC zone, there is now a much larger setback from the Smith Street residents, and that was kind of a compromise due to their concerns over commercial pushed up against them. Then on page 20, the following dimensional requirements shall apply only to the memory care facility. That was for that conceptualized potential new memory care use. And then the last was an amendment to section 7.11.2, which is your minor home occupations provision. It currently makes clear that home occupations are allowed, minor occupations are allowed in multifamily. We added the language and BGS to that. In the interest of time, just bear with me for literally 2 more minutes. From the supplemental material, supplemental and supportive narrative that I provided, I just wanted to make clear, once, as I already said, you guys have the authority to approve, modify, and deny. And as I said, I believe staff has some modifications. that they'd like to propose. And I hope that we can go through this process by working through kind of those modifications. I also just want to state for the record from this supplemental narrative, supportive narrative, that in our review of the comprehensive plan of zoning, which is one of the standards for consideration on a text amendment, we do believe it is consistent with the town's comprehensive plan of zoning. We've used similar regulatory provisions that are used elsewhere in the regulations for other multifamily and age-restricted housing. We also believe we're generally consistent with the POCD, taking the POCD into consideration, which is also another consideration for you guys, especially in the context of some of the demographic change and statements around housing and the need for more diverse housing, the recognition of the demographics of an aging community. And also, we did confront and did take on the fact that we do recognize the narrative within the POCD that was not favorable to housing in this location. But that narrative also made clear the opportunity to generate tax revenue or grow the tax base for the community. And we believe we are consistent with that. An age-restricted facility would be a fiscally positive development to the community. We do recognize that that will have to be further discussed, probably through a special permit application in the context of a fiscal impact statement. We do recognize there are other costs. It's not just about school systems, there's other town services and so forth. But we believe we would meet that standard of growing the tax base and doing so in a positive fashion. So with that, I will actually end my presentation, and both John and I are available to answer any questions the commission may have at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we'll hear from our staff. Director of Planning, Michelle Light.
Thank you. So this is a request by Down East LLC to add section 5.11 Buckland Gateway South Overlay Zone to create a new overlay zone applicable only in our design commercial zone to establish bulk requirements for age-restricted development, as read in the legal notice. I won't repeat that. And I have the report that I provided to the commission as part of the record. So the applicant has provided the zoning text 511 Balkan Gateway South Overlay Zone, as well as a red line text for the tables and the permitted industrial uses, commercial industrial area density dimensional requirements, and as well as proposed language changes to design commercial zone. Excuse me. The applicant has also provided the text explaining how it's conforming with our comprehensive plan, as well as the plan of conservation development addresses the regulations related to that. So this text would create an age-restricted development with limited commercial amenities. Site design objectives and standards would include buffers, the requirement of walkability, open space requirements have all been included within the regulation text. Similar to what I provided to the commission about a year ago when we were looking at the text provided by Down East then, there's a chart that I provided, and it kind of compares kind of what we had a year ago that we were looking at, kind of red lines what's proposed today, and I did add a couple comments in green, which would be suggestions from staff perspective. So kind of looking at this chart again, what Don reviewed, your permitted uses would be age restricted, would be limited to 18 and older. It would be a homeowners association, private development, private services. We're talking about a zone change requirement. He's calling a master plan. I think we call it general plan throughout our regulations. I think we're talking one and the same. Master plan, zone change would be the initial application. We don't usually see a special exception site plan simultaneously and have actually ruled against that over the years, so I don't think we would typically entertain that process, but that would be the second step once the zone were established. Again, going on through the setback requirements, one of the comments staff had was the separating distance between buildings in this residential zone, looking at more commonly being 20-foot separating distance. That's what we have in all of our multifamily SRDs, DRZs, and I think I heard them accepting that change. One of the other comments that I wanted to make is the way the language reads, it's a 4.5 units per acre requirement. Every other zone we have, we call it net buildable acreage, and we have a definition of net buildable acreage, and it subtracts wetlands and steep slopes and things like that. So to be consistent with our other zones, I would recommend that this be a net buildable acreage calculation. And again, the definition exists, so it's really just a matter of having it be referred back to that. And Don and I did speak to that previously. I think the other change that I was recommending was related to the impervious coverage. I understand the goal of having the overlay zone have the open space requirements, but there's a 75% impervious coverage that kind of has been held over for the design commercial zone forever, that I'd like to see reduced to 65% because that's what we have everywhere else in all of our commercial zoning. There's a way you can do some pervious pavement and get to a little bit higher coverage. So again, my recommendation would be, since we're reducing the acreage down to 8, we should maybe reduce the impervious coverage because we're taking away an open space requirement. So those are kind of some of the changes to the technical document that we have. So just to be clear, this proposal would not require a commercial component to be done simultaneously with a residential. Some of our other zones require commercial and residential to be done at an equal rate or something like this. This would be a standalone zone that could be just residential. They're talking about some incidental commercial uses, maybe in the clubhouse and things like that. The other carve out of the 10 acres would be a separate project that could be done, you know, either before or after, or sit there for years. I mean, it's not, one is not dependent on the other. Just want to be clear about that. And then just to reiterate some of what Don mentioned about the changes to design commercial table, adding the 8-acre minimum, but also the separating distance of 200 feet from Smith Street. I think his point's well taken. If you don't ever see the overlay zone come into play, you know, you will have a setback from Smith Street for any potential commercial uses that do get proposed. So when evaluating a text amendment...
What item number are you on here?
Number 10.
Okay.
When evaluating a text amendment, the Plan of Conservation is consulted to inform the Planning and Zoning's decision of the future goals of the area. If you recall, in 2024, we recognize the importance of this area as it contains the largest remaining undeveloped tract of commercially zoned land, providing an opportunity for the town to grow its tax base. This area is anticipated to support regional-oriented business, retail service, or other uses that complement the Buckland corridor, and the zoning in this area should integrate this area with large Buckland Gateway area. At that time, further study was recommended. I think to the applicant's point, after the study of the subcommittee, what they're proposing would add to the tax base in that it's a senior project and in theory will not tax our school system additionally. There are some other parts of our POCD that this does support, and that is really accommodating housing for our growing trends, which we know we have a senior housing need in town, and it is a growing trend in our region to need housing in general. So this proposal does support that. And also the creation of affordable units. This does come with a 15% affordable unit requirement. Two comments I want to make about that. There's 2 provisions within the regulations where the developer's looking for a reduction in square footage of affordable units, and then there's another section that kind of questions whether or not the commission would consider any kind of bonuses, if you will, for, I think it was solar. You had there's some other areas of question marks in the regulations as to whether or not the commission would consider some things if they're done with the affordable units credit for that. So it's something that the commission will need to talk a little bit further about. Talking with other staff, there's the acknowledgement that 100 or 200 and more senior housing will put more demands on our senior services. It'll put more demand on our recreation services. I mean, everybody acknowledges that. It'll increase the call for services. Hopefully the offset of the increase in the tax base can help support some of that stuff. One of the bigger concerns that was expressed at the staff level is to make sure that we do get sidewalks to the maximum extent possible. If we're creating these walkable communities, a real concern is that we don't just leave people without getting into Evergreen Walk particularly and into the other commercial areas that we're trying to support. I'm not sure how we get to that other than through our actual application and seeing a submission in here, but that was certainly a concern of the staff. Traffic impacts would be considered when a zone change is requested. access management considerations would come through any traffic studies that were done, and again, they would be required with any other utility and infrastructure analysis at the time of a zone change application. We did send this off to CROG. We did receive a response dated April 17th, stating the staff of the Regional Planning Commission, Capital Region Council of Governments reviewed the zoning referral and finds no apparent conflict with regional plans and policies or the concerns of neighboring towns. So if this is approved, the Planning Department has some recommended changes other than those specifically mentioned. One of the things I'd like to just clarify, we do have some buffer clarification tonight. I did want to mention the 100-foot buffer that's in the regulation really goes back to the 80s, and that's what it used to be. Along the line, the commission said you don't put buffers along streets. So in essence, we currently don't put buffers along streets. That's why we did add some language about existing berms and trying to maintain existing berms where possible, because the berms, you know, in that area do exist along the street frontages. So that's where that 100-foot comes from, just for anybody that looking for a little background on that. So I agree to eliminate that because we couldn't apply it, but I think the idea of having a 25-foot buffer and then your setback does provide a good, because that buffer would be a planted buffer per our regulations, so that would provide adequate screening. I do want to make clear, though, that the town line, for all practical purposes, acts as a property line from, you know, the 25-foot buffering and that kind of thing, because it's always comes up as a question over time. So somewhere in the regulations, just make that statement when we're talking about the buffers, so it's clear from here on out, because it does always come up as a question. Other than that, I did mention the net buildable acreage, the separating distance, and the impervious coverage. Those are some other changes recommended.
Thank you. Justin, anything?
No comments from me. Thanks.
So we now open the floor to comments from members of the public. And I'll recognize Mike Willett. Let me just say, Mike has resigned from this commission in order to run for a seat on the town council, to be appointed seat on the town council. So thank you for all you've done for us, and good luck in your future endeavors. Mike also was on the committee, so I asked him, I suggested he might want to come in here and give his side of it, just because he's one of the three commission members who was on that committee. The Three Amigos, yes. Okay.
Yes. So, yeah, thank you for the kind words. I did miss you, so I came back tonight. But I'm standing here in support of what we have collectively put together. A lot of energy and effort went into what has been proposed, and it is probably the best use of that property right now, which frankly mitigates the risk for South Windsor of having an 830G development dropped into our lap, which would have some really negative impacts on the budget, the school system. It would change the town. So this is the best use of the property at this point. If we could have held it in storage, if you will, in perpetuity until retail came back or we could find another use, that would have been ideal. That's not in the cards. So this is our best chance at saving the school system and saving our budget. And I do want to thank Commissioner Wagner and everybody else that participated in this, including the residents. This is the result of a collaborative effort that is, again, the best use of the property right now for the town. So thank you.
Thank you. Seeing there's no one else from the public, we'll proceed to hear from members of the commission. At this stage, we're in a public hearing, so any of the alternates who are here, which is only one, you're going to get seated later anyway, but you can start.
I don't have any comments right now. I think that, I mean, the proposed, I mean, to Mike's point, it'd be great that if it could be held for retail, but I think the second best option, the idea of the thoughtfulness of 55 and over and not for allowing under 18 years old for residents, I think that it kind of fits fits for where we need to be right now.
Commissioner Dexter.
And just to reiterate Michelle's comment about seeing, if we get beyond tonight, which I hope we will, that we see the master plan or general plan come in with a zone change and then the site plan after that. So, and thanks, Mike, for your input on the subcommittee, and I think we did a good job.
Kevin Foley.
Well, to reiterate, again, Mike, thank you very much for your time and your efforts on this committee with Stephanie and Steve. To reiterate what you said as far as with the 8-30G that looms over us, until we get help from our state reps that kind of see that we are that one town and we're kind of like on an island by ourselves right now. We need their help, but for now, this was the best result for this parcel. So,
Thank you.
I agree with Kevin's comments. I think this is a great use of the parcel. I'm personally happy to see more senior housing come in. I think that's a good thing. Just a quick question. Donald, you said that the changes that were proposed by Michelle were all okay with you? The 65% impervious, the 20 feet separating distance, those are all okay?
Yeah, so for the record, Don Poland. Yes, we've already verified the separation distance between buildings. The reg was 15, she's proposing 20. Our designers looked and we're either 24 or 26 feet between each building, so we're fine with that. And the 65 feet impervious coverage in the DC zone to remain, we are also fine with. Just looking at some of our conceptuals, because then it's 45 in the BSG, we're at like 36 on the concept plan in the BSG, and conceptuals that were done in the DC zone were also around 36 or so, so they're well under that 65% threshold, so we're good with that.
Great. One other question. How do we monitor that nobody under 18 could be living in these facilities?
My guess, it will be monitored by the homeowners association that's there. I mean, they're going to have a board and everything else like that. And I would think a neighbor might tell if another neighbor were. Just my guess.
If I may also, just in the context of if you have that provision and then someone applies to be in your school system, that would kind of give it away.
If they give that address, yeah, I guess that would be kind of a tip-off. Got it.
So,
Otherwise, great. Thank you.
thanks.
Okay, so stick around, Don. First of all of the maps that you've shown also include that vacant residential property on Smith Street,
Yes.
but that is not currently part of the DC zone. So how are we dealing with that?
I think you're right. I never really thought about that in the dimensional standards. So we have.
Why couldn't you add it in as part of a proposal? Oh, it has to be existing DC to start with.
Well, again, yeah. And do you have something to add to that? I never really conceptualized that, to be honest with you. I always thought it would be part of a development application coming forward because that's where you would gain access to get out to the road and get over to Evergreen with a connection there. I never thought about it in the context of the zoning of the BGS only being an overlay over the DC zone and how that parcel works into it.
So, I mean, one choice would be can they do what they want to do on that property without putting it in the DC zone, without putting it in the overlay?
They can if they're not going to count it towards their, requirements, right? So if you got a 4.5 unit per acre and you don't have that in the overlay zone, you can't use it towards it. In other words, you can have a walking path on a residentially zoned piece of property, right?
Okay.
Without that getting rezoned, that could still occur. But if you need that land for any of your calculations, then I think you're going to have to address it.
Right. I'm hopeful we don't need that land for any calculations, but I guess worst case scenario at the development stage, the zoning amendment you know, the zoning map amendment could ask for a text change as a DC there. At the same time, they're requesting the master plan zone change to the OG. You know, you could do another amendment in the process if it were needed. I'm hopeful that it isn't. And my feeling is, so long as you would allow a walking trail to transverse that site, then we're probably fine. Sorry.
So I think actually changing that would be a significant change to this application, right?
I guess it depends on what you do. Like we say that it can only apply in the DC zone.
Could we say it applies to the DC zone?
And
And it was included in the overlay, but not in the DC zone? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, so in other words, your overlay can include other properties besides DC zone land.
Yeah,
So that's
Okay.
what I'm suggesting. And maybe it can only have an incremental, you know, this happens to be a property that the owner already owns, right? So,
yeah.
all right, between now and the next meeting, we'll come up with some way that we can tweak it so that you're not limited to just DC zone, but very,
Okay,
not opening up the door to the whole Smith Street.
okay. There are two access roads to the back of, I think, is that called Buckland Plaza? The plaza that trucks use to get in behind those commercial buildings in the plaza. And I brought this up before in the committee, but I'm not sure how they're being factored into this. I mean, we can't get rid of them. They're needed for first responders and convenient for other uses. Okay.
Yeah, so my general feeling here, and it kind of ties back to Michelle's talking about the town line being the starting measuring point for the buffers and the setbacks. We do recognize that the town line and the property line, as it runs there along the south of this property, that there are encroachments of the roadway behind the plaza. I think at the end of the day, at the development application stage, the special permit stage, that is all gonna have to be sorted out. It's gonna be shown on the detailed site plan. They're gonna have to be able to show either corrections to it or easements that grant the right to cross over it and so forth. And just to say, like, any of the impervious coverage from those encroachments are gonna go against this parcel and so forth. So it's gonna have to be dealt with. I don't know how to deal with it at this point, you know? But all of those things are typically dealt with through that site plan process.
And at the zone change time, when you're talking about the traffic pattern in the areas, it would be certainly something that the zone change times would be
mean,
appropriate to
You
at
could
least
actually
discuss.
sell it to those people who have the plaza. Say, you want that road, you gotta buy it.
Because all the concept plans showed that as a point of access for this development, right?
Right.
So we're gonna have to deal with it at some point.
Okay.
If I could just add to that, remember that Down East has a strong working relationship with the plaza, and they have discussed that there will need to be tweaks and adjustments made moving forward. So I'm confident all those can be worked out.
When you count the parking, are the garages actually considered part of the parking, or are they not?
Yeah, so we're actually, I mean, I think as conceptualized, we're overbuilt on parking here. Parking is going to be vastly abundant. I believe it's conceptualized with 2 garage units per unit, which meets the 1.75 per unit. But then it's also going to have driveway spaces in front. So not a concern here as conceptualized for that. And then the AV wiring would be to the to the garage area, so that chargers could be added later, so.
So, I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff going around in public discussions about requiring too much parking.
I think, you know, what you have for, I mean, that's typical, what we see for multifamily is your two-car garage and your driveway, and they're not large driveways. But I think your parking around the development's only a .25, which I know there was a question amongst staff was whether it was going to be enough for extra parking. So I did a little bit of Googling what other requirements are, and it seems to be in line with what typical multifamily developments are getting.
Okay, so enough visitor parking plus on the site of the building.
I think you're probably okay with it.
The 2,000-foot amenities, thought occurred to me that that might be useful if you're doing it in phases. You know, you get a 2,000-foot amenity, and you're doing phase one, you know, or something like that.
You know, what we did with other developments, Steve, is I think we would be looking for the amenities to be done at the same rate as a phase one would have phase one amenities, phase two, so that we didn't have a phase one with no amenities. So I think through the special exception approval process, you would definitely be looking for a phasing plan.
Okay.
Spell that out.
And I thought there was language in here that allowed you to reduce the size of the affordable units, but,
There is,
okay.
in the affordability language.
And I was following along with you, I didn't see it, but I thought I saw it earlier today, so I'll take your word for it.
Right. Okay, let me come back to that, and let me just address the affordability, While the affordable units shall on average be of the same number of bedrooms, bathrooms, and exterior finishes, interior finishes may differ, and exterior and interior finishes.
What page are you on?
Page 8. And the square footage of the units may be reduced by up to 15%. That's the affordable unit reduction.
Okay, good.
I knew I addressed it, so. I think that would go a long way. As I've said previously, you know, the affordable units at 15% are going to be challenging. With all the developers we've spoken with along the way, this is the largest pushback we get. I've argued with you guys about it before and done arguing. So you're getting your 15%. But that reduction would go a long way to working out the affordability aspects of them, so.
Okay. On page 5, there's a paragraph labeled I as in iota, and we have the word waived. Are we using that word, or like in the next to the last line there? I just thought maybe we had another.
Where is that again? I'm sorry.
Page 5, item I. Requirements may be reduced or waived by the commission.
I would recommend just switching that, maybe modified by the commission. I think that's probably carryover language from somewhere else in your regs. I could be wrong, but we'll just change that to modify.
And then on page 7, there's an item 6 that gives interior finishes. I didn't think I saw drywall.
I'm sorry?
The interior finishes shall be, this is page 7, item 6. Interior finishes shall be of essentially higher superior characteristics, and they may include a whole bunch of things, but didn't include drywall, which probably you want to allow.
Could add it. I believe I lifted this from elsewhere in your regs, but once again, I could be wrong. I don't remember every tweak I made, so. So do you want drywall added into that list?
I mean, I think so, right?
Okay, we can do that.
And I think that's it for me.
Steve, do you have any comment on if you go to page 7E3?
Oh. I think the answer to that is, that comes out of the legislation, right?
Yeah. So
I mean, maybe we ought to be campaigning with our legislators, but, I mean, if somebody puts in solar, they put in solar and battery, they should be getting some, or for that matter, well, we've already required heat pumps. They should be getting a benefit on the affordability of it. Becomes more affordable, okay? But I think that may not be legal, so maybe we just forget about that for now.
And I think that's where I was heading, and I kind of left it hanging out there, so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, I know. On page 13, never mind. Separate discussion, we're going to be playing with some of these tables. And I was going to comment on tattoo parlors, but yeah, we can deal with that in a separate discussion. So, I'm thinking about how to go forward. Any more comments?
Just one question, with the reduction of square footage in the affordability portion, in our regulations, we're really not supposed to be able to notice like a distinct change between, whether there's a unit smaller than another. So like if you're gonna have 6 units combined in that, we don't wanna have it all 6 units in there to be affordable. So however you come up with that, we wanna make sure it fits the regulation that we already have in place, that it is to blend in, so.
Yeah,
That's all.
a slightly thinner unit in one of these 6.
Yeah,
Yeah, usually if the language isn't here in my provision, I think it's elsewhere in your inclusionary provision. If not, I can make sure we include language. But that units are evenly distributed throughout the development, that they're not clustered. I think I recall language somewhere to that effect. Okay, we'll tweak this, so, no issue. Thank
That
you.
reminds me, I found another thing on page 8. At the very bottom, item 2, it says the age-restricted residential use shall be appropriately buffered from adjacent residential and commercial uses. My reaction was, really? It's contrary to everything else we're trying to do.
Well, that's your criteria for consideration under the special exception. So I don't think that's binding you. It's for you to make a determination that buffering is appropriately addressed.
But I mean, it's almost like one of these units would have to be buffered from their neighbors. I mean, why do we need that? Let me ask it that way.
I would say you're going from a single-family zone to a higher density zone, so it's not a 50-foot buffer, it's 25 feet, so it's a screen, the history of that, to be honest with you, Steve, is we used to have 50 feet in all of our SRDs, then we reduced it to 25, and we made it more of a screening for that very reason, it's residences, against the residences. However, there is a denser, you're putting in density next to it, so I think it's appropriate to have some kind of screening there.
But this just refers to the age-restricted use. I think we're really talking about the whole thing. I mean, it's like the 15%, this is like saying those 15% have to be put off in a corner somewhere. That's the way I read that.
Well, how about any development shall be appropriately buffered? I mean, you don't have to say age-restricted, just say any development.
Yeah.
Because you have buffer requirements,
Right.
throughout the text, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about that. All right, so we're kind of low on members here, but I'm thinking we probably don't need to extend the public hearing. But I'd like to, we can talk about during the regular session whether we want to act on this tonight or wait for the other members at a separate meeting. But any reason to keep the public hearing open? Okay, so we'll close the public hearing at 8:02 p.m.
Could I just make a suggestion? If you are going to close the hearing, could you just acknowledge that staff will be providing the modifications as discussed tonight.
Okay,
At our work meeting.
yes.
So,
All right.
thank you.
So now that we're going to call to order the regular meeting, we're going to seat Commissioner Boganski for the vacancy left by Commissioner Willett. So we do have up here, number one, application 2717P, but since we're going to have some minor revisions to the text.
Yeah, what I can do is,
I think you also have minutes to review, correct?
Oh, right, I'm sorry, I skipped over that. Right, minutes for 4/22. I read them, I was happy with them. Any other comments? Okay, we approved them by consensus. There's nobody here from the public. So we now go on to application 2517P, which is what we just heard in the public hearing. I think we can defer acting on that till the next regular meeting.
yeah, I can provide a document kind of addressing the items from tonight for you to have to. What?
She's gonna, in a workshop, you can amend that in staff.
Up to how you want to do it.
I mean, I think we got a pretty strong consensus here. Do we like the thing? So,
Okay, so then I would recommend if you are going to approve it with the changes as discussed tonight, that you would want to make a finding that it's in conformance with your plan on conservation development, and I should give you an effective date since I didn't provide you with that. So if you
Okay.
give me a second, I could come up with it if you decide to do that.
so who would like to make that motion? Oh, you're going to write it for us? Okay.
June 16th would be an effective date post any kind of appeal period.
So would someone like to make a motion to approve this application as modified?
I make a motion to approve application 25-17P Down East designated commercial DC zone overlay text amendment with Michelle's.
June 16th? And noting that it was
In conformance to your plan of conservation and development.
found by the, CROG. Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Well, thanks for your hard work on this. I know we dragged you through, quite a series of meetings and everything.
I can't say we enjoyed it all, but we got to a place where I think it'll work for everyone.
All right, so the next item is a discussion regarding miscellaneous proposed zoning text amendments, and despite the small size of the entry, we have a fairly long document to look at, and I was hoping Michelle could guide us through that.
Sure, so a lot of these we talked about originally, but then there's some that Steve and I had kind of reviewed, some changes that he was looking for. So we'll just start right with page 1. Again, we were just clearing a little bit of the language around alcoholic beverages. It's changed over the years, and it used to be that you had to have separating distances and all those kinds of things. So we're just basically simplifying it.
Excuse me, can I suggest that as we go through this, if any of us wants to discuss this particular item, we'll interrupt you rather than hold it off to the end?
Sure, yeah, and please do, yes. So we're adding a definition for alcoholic beverage, alcoholic liquor. So the red lines are the proposals. Under fencing, again, just clarifying that it's more than commercial sites that we're dealing with. The next section is your use table under residential zones. Again, just a cleanup on page 4. We're just taking out some old language about having mental, alcoholic, drug cases, that kind of stuff.
I'm wondering on that public utility buildings one, where you added C, section 718, do we need to add, I don't know, communication towers or,
For what the name is, sure, we can add that.
or what the right, whatever the right term is?
Yeah, for the name of it. Yep. I don't think there's much else we're doing in our residential tables. Moving on, and I see the numbering's lost, on page 8, we used to have requirements of square footages. You had to have certain square footages and whatnot, and minimum living requirements. That went out of the regulations many years ago because it's basically illegal to do that for single-family houses. So this is just some old language that we're eliminating that is not necessary anymore. Page 9, under accessory apartments, we're just clarifying that you only get one of them, because we've had that
Back
question
on
come
page
up.
8, we're making a policy change on the roadside stands.
Oh, I'm sorry, roadside stands, yeah, I apologize, I missed that. Down here, yes, we're going to 180 days because they tend to be up longer anyhow, so that's more in line with what we do. Slaughtering of livestock, this is a clarification that it only happens if you get approved by the commission through an animal agriculture application. The next page is the accessory apartments, limiting it to 1. Page 10, again, is adding a statement about handicap spaces in the proximity, making them be reasonable locations. Page 11, again, just a minor change on adding entrance and/or egress on E2, and then at the bottom there, if no public transit is available at the time of site plan application, the commission may require site for a future shelter. And this, again, is in our multifamily zone, so good suggestion. Going on to page 12, we're just adding some more language around the pedestrian bicycle, and again, directing people. Section 6.7 has some really specific requirements based on what you're building, whether it's multifamily or commercial, whatnot, so you're being directed to those regulations.
So on that one, considered as an accessory structure, sometimes these things are like put up against a house, or I'm wondering if this is too restrictive or not.
Well, it's not a requirement, it's
But
just
I mean,
encouraged, right?
You want to put in one of these boxes that you can lock your bike in?
Yeah.
Okay. Do all the rules of accessory structures interfere with doing it the way people likely do it, which would be
Well, if they want to put in the setback, it would be, yeah. It depends on where it would be located, right?
All right, I think that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would come up in the design, and you'd see it as part of your original design for multifamily. You could probably address it at that point.
Michelle, I'm probably way off base on this, but just looking at that section, pedestrian and bicycle, makes me think of this phase 1 of the Crosstown Trail. Is there going to be any regulation language having to do with that project, or is that just a town thing and we don't care?
Well, we approved.
We approved it, but
What are you thinking of specifically?
I don't even know. It's the first time I kind of thought about.
Well, to give you an example, we want there's a parking lot proposed to get you to the town trail, and there's handicap accessibility considerations. So some of the things that we look for in the pedestrian bicycle section are part of the crosstown trail, so those would be, it's a little bit of an oddity because it's, you know, in a corridor, it's not really a
There's no
specific
lighting
site.
involved or anything like that, so.
No.
Okay.
You kind of pick and pull from parts of the regulation for it, yeah. So the next really kind of bulk of the changes in our industrial commercial zone. So we talked about this at the meeting about taking out residential as a new potential use in our industrial zone. So this allows for existing residential uses that are out there to keep going and maintaining themselves It doesn't allow for someone to come in and say, hey, I'm going to put a house up here and an industrial business. So it is a change. We took out duplexes, horses, and I'm not really sure why it was even in there. This is where we added the churches. I think we talked about that. Religious institutions is being added. Bottom page 13. Some of this is just some cleanup that we've suggested, getting rid of automobile fuel. It's in other places. Adding of a banquet facility. We have them in town. We don't have them as a use in our use table. We get questions about them, so we're adding that as a potential use. The beverage store quick shop is, again, repetitive to a retail store. Convenience retail small scale. This is one that just added, and let me tell you why and see what your thoughts are on this. So we have a couple properties along Route 5, not a lot of them, that are in the industrial zone, but they're old commercial businesses, and the Way Best Chicken is the best example. So you've got some small 2,500 or smaller buildings that are having a very difficult time getting any use for them. So the idea was to be able to have some convenience retail, not drive-throughs or anything like that, but maybe a convenience store or a sub shop or something so that could support the industrial areas around it. So we thought that potentially something, if it was small-scale existing building along a Route 5 corridor, might help out some of these sites that are looking and really can't meet our requirement of an accessory use to an industrial user, which is what Way Best Chicken retail outlet was, right? They had the industrial user of the, so that is something that is being proposed. The next page, again, just clarifying that garages, we're talking about a public parking garage.
And we're moving freezer lockers to the industrial.
To the industrial zone, which is where we typically find them anyhow. The bottom of page 16, we're addressing the idea that tattoo parlors would be permitted as a personal service shop use.
So is it still called a tattoo parlor? I don't.
They call themselves tattoo, so yeah, I think so.
Okay.
As far as I know. And then the last change on the table would be on page 18. We're switching wholesale to be strictly an industrial zone by site plan. Okay, moving on to Buckland Gateway Zone. Again, these are some changes I think that Steve, looking through some of the use tables, just cleaning up some of our uses. Under prohibited uses, we just add a definition for adult-oriented being prohibited. We take out the tattoo, so it is no longer a prohibited use. Again, at the bottom, we're just kind of clarifying that we don't really have arcades anymore. We usually have gaming centers, things like that. In the I-291 corridor development zone. Not that we have much development potential, but there still is some property certainly that could do that.
So on the adult thing, I know that some massage parlors have a very bad reputation and bad experience, but there are legitimate massage services also. Are we protecting those people without having the problematic version?
I'm pretty sure through your definition, those people wouldn't fall under those definitions.
Okay.
Right, yeah. Moving on to your industrial zone. Again, we've added a couple things, just a statement about the rail, that we don't want disruption to the public roads under the rail category in 20. Rail requirements. 21, we are adding the traffic requirement language that we had prepared in other parts of the regulations and adding it into this section. It's in another part, but kind of to reinforce it, we have it in this section. Landscaping buffers, I think Justin went over his changes there. I don't know if you want to comment on those at all, Justin.
Yeah, just to summarize this, so really with the landscaping, the goal of this would really to be requiring primarily native species, some hybrids, and encouraging the use of seed mixes in areas where, maybe before it was lawn that gets mowed a ton, but nobody ever sees it on the side of buildings. So maybe encouraging a seed mix that maybe doesn't need to be mowed because people aren't walking through it. So that was really the goal with this. So really putting an emphasis on using native plant species. And there was one item on page 24, just removing senior residence development from the buffer requirements because we do not require a buffer for SRDs. So that was the main point of that. And then throughout that section is just language clarification for the majority. On page 27, 6.2.5 for screening requirements, language added, if feasible, care shall be taken to ensure that screening is not impassable to wildlife. So not creating buffers or things that break up natural corridors if feasible. For example, if there's goods or something that needs to be protected through the use of a tall fence, it's not really feasible to have any gaps in that, you know, protecting the property owner's interests, but otherwise, if possible, preventing those types of gaps. The next item would be outdoor lighting on page 28. So this is something that we had been talking about for quite a while now, just conforming more with dark sky compliant regulations, reducing the color temperatures of bulbs. We have a 3000 K maximum now. Lights will be controlled by dimmers, timers, and sensors, so light is only used when needed. The goal of this being to reduce the impact of light to wildlife and also reduce energy costs for applicants. So really trying to focus on only lighting what's necessary when it's necessary and keeping skies dark as possible at night, and reinforcing the full cutoff requirement, which we already had in our regulations. So that's really the bulk of that. And then just providing more, some definitions in the way of backlight, describing BUG, B-U-G, which is an acronym, stands for backlight, uplight, and glare. It's just a way to essentially determine if a light meets dark sky, is dark sky compliant. And then one item, taking out, we had reference to something called grandfathered luminaires, so just changing grandfathered to vested, because grandfathered itself has sort of nefarious origins, not such a great word to be used, so we're just changing that to vested now. And going over to section 6.4 again.
Before you go there,
Sure.
I'd like to back up. 634, page 29.
Yes.
I'm thinking, I just want to know that if someone wanted to add a baseball field, that assuming they could meet all these other requirements, they'd be able to put the kind of lighting you need so the ball doesn't disappear, you know, as it's on
Sure.
its arc. So is this going to allow, you know, maybe the baseball fields we have now, they shine into residences and everything, but if someone, or the football fields behind the high school,
Right.
or the multi-use field, are they going to be able to have the kind of lighting that's needed to safely play the sport that they're covering? And this,
Yeah, that's a good question. I did not intend to restrict recreational lighting in that way. So if there's maybe better language to clean that up, I am open to that.
You know, we can do is we can run this by, you know, because we just had an application where the lighting was approved and it met our dark sky compliance. So we'll take a look at this tweak here and just see if, you know, make sure that would still meet that, right? So we're not doing anything that would, because we certainly intend to be able to allow like what we approved.
okay.
Yeah, that's a good catch, good comment. Going over to page 31, this is really, yeah, just driving that native landscaping point home, making sure that the proper plants are selected for proper places, choosing, things that are actually going to survive in hostile environments like a parking lot. And then going to page 32, item 6 at the bottom, this is really just providing some suggestions of plants that could be used, cleaning up some language here. Previously, it said that it was parcels bordering conservation easements and or regulated wetland areas, but I eliminated that item and figured, well, perhaps this could be applied to any parcel if it's appropriate. So just providing some species suggestions, not requirements in any way, but just suggestions.
I'm going to rely on Commissioner Foley to understand this list of plants. Go ahead.
Continue. Good.
Yeah, go ahead. We're
Okay.
on 33 now?
Yes. Yeah, so this next section, we were getting some input from our engineering department. So really just looking at storm drainage here, the design of stormwater management systems. So in accordance with the 2024 Connecticut Stormwater Quality Manual, which was just recently updated. So that is the latest and greatest edition. And that stormwater management system, the design of which shall be consistent with the standards of the Town of South Windsor Public Improvement Specifications Manual, consistent with good engineering practices, which entails being sealed by a licensed professional engineer, and based on environmentally sound site planning and engineering techniques. We talks a little bit more about peak flow rates and design storms. Also more information for directly connected impervious area and talking about controlling the 10 and 100-year post-development peak flows. So really just a lot about more effectively managing stormwater and best management practices. Our engineering department went into a good amount of depth on this one, just talking about different types of practices that could be used, suggestions to applicants, vegetative filter strips, pretreatment swales, oil grit separators, things of that nature. And requiring rights to drain onto adjoining properties, and stormwater detention basins that are visible from the street must be attractively designed and landscaped with side slopes no greater than 4-on-1 for maintenance purposes. So really just addressing how those basins are, how they're designed, not only aesthetically, but also functionally.
In that paragraph C, just where it says design must control the 10 and 100-year to be less than. Should it be less than or equal to the 10-year pre-development?
That's a good question. I think I would probably want to defer to John. Yeah, John or Jeff. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We essentially asked the town engineer to rewrite the section here on drainage, so we'll have to have him. Yeah, no, we appreciate that.
So you're saying less than or equal to the 10 and 100-year pre-development. Okay. Yep, we'll run that by them. Section 8.6, standards for maps and plans. So standards for site plans, we had maps of A2 standard, and we're just including T2 in there, which is just language around, T2 would be requiring, it's for topography, showing topography on maps to a certain standard. 865, standards for conservation plans. We added an item there, the council, the guide for preparation of the conservation plan shall be the Connecticut Guidelines for Soil Erosion and Sediment Control of the Council on Soil and Water Conservation in collaboration with the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, March 2024, as amended. So this document was also updated in 2024, latest and greatest. Section 8.7, architectural design and review. If you go to page 36, this, again, is just driving that native plant idea just carrying that through, taking a little bit from the screening, making sure that, if feasible, is not impassable to wildlife. We touch a little bit about exterior lighting at item 11, just ensuring that lighting shall be, complies with section 6.3, where we go into more detail. And yeah, then we go to section 10.3, just some definitions. We clarify a gaming center. Michelle had touched on that earlier. Wholesale sales, providing that information. And then also just more stuff for personal service shops in the way of tattoo parlors, removing that section at the end, saying that tattoo parlors are not considered a personal service shop. So section 11.2 on page 38, Appendix B for the design residence zone, just clarify these regulations were in effect for design residence developments that were approved prior to July 31st, 1990. Section 11.3, Appendix C, outdoor lighting guidelines. This ties into section 6.3, so speaks to dark sky compliant lighting, helping to save on energy costs, and really reiterating that, and then going back to the color requirement being more specific, no greater than 3,000 K. Page 39, Appendix F for the design residence zone, just taking that same language from 11.2. These regulations were in effect for design residence developments that were approved after July 31st, 1990. Senior residence development, same idea, with a date of March 3rd, 2023. Section 11.9, Appendix I for buffer and landscaping, just more information about using native plant material, native to the northeastern United States, and making sure that the buffers are not impassable to wildlife if feasible. For the air pollution buffers, adding perennials to that, because the more layers, the better, and perennials, if they're dense enough, they can help to eliminate air pollution as well. Some minor text changes, just for clarification. And finally, item D on page 41, just the crop pollinator habitat, that plant material being native to the northeastern United States. I did receive a comment from design professionals. I'd sent the landscaping regulations over to them, to their landscape architect for comment, and they did provide some information. Their suggestion was maybe 75 to 80% of the landscaping being native, and then the remainder of which being exotic. So, although, this did come in very late, it came in at 4:33 today when I sent it out a month ago, but that's neither here nor there. I do appreciate the feedback, and I think that can be, we'll defer to the public hearing for that, give them the opportunity to speak on that.
So I think that's a good point. Are we being too strict by requiring all the planting in these places to be native or cultivars of native? So the 80% rule, is there enough in there to make sure we don't get invasive species or whatever in the other 20%?
Yeah, so we already have information in our regulations that prohibit invasive species. The University of Connecticut and the Connecticut Invasive Plant Working Group, we reference their documents. They keep a list of current invasive species, or species that are being looked at for their invasive potential. So we reference those documents and prohibit applications from using those. So yeah, that 20% exotic species is, I certainly don't want to be restrictive on applicants. So I do appreciate the feedback. But yeah, to your point,
you would recommend going down that, taking advantage of that?
I'm open to it. I'd like to hear their landscape architect speak on it, but I'm certainly open to it.
Justin, do we ever look at the next level of invasiveness as far as insects go? that some of these plantings or choices may encourage something that we don't want in our town or our state? You know, there's,
Yeah, so there is a tree, there's a tree, it's called the tree of heaven. It's an invasive species. It grows along roadsides. I think it comes, pretty sure it comes from China, and it has been growing in the States for quite some time, dotting around the landscape, and recently, within the last few years, a pest was introduced from China called the spotted lanternfly. So coincidentally, the tree of heaven is a host plant for the spotted lanternfly. So because this tree is here, these lanternflies flock to that, and now they have their host. They're like, oh, this is great. So they land on those, they lay eggs prolifically and reproduce. And spotted lanternfly is an agricultural pest. It kills grapes. It kills a lot of different agricultural products. So, yeah, I mean, everything is all connected. So my intent with this was, you know, if you look at one thing, if you can eliminate potentially invasive plants or invasive plants altogether, yeah, you're sort of addressing that in one way or another, so.
So just to follow up on her question, I don't know if the tree itself is invasive.
It is.
Okay, so, but our question is, you know, are there other examples of trees that aren't, but they host invasive wildlife, insects? Or?
Yeah, I mean, though that spotted lanternfly, it doesn't only, like, it doesn't only, you know, attack and feed on the tree of heaven. It attacks our native plants too. It likes maples. Like I said, it likes grapes. So it finds a way, but you know. So I don't know. Does that answer your question? Yes. Okay.
All right.
I think it helps not to create monocultures, right, too, so if you do have something that comes through and is going to start wiping out a certain species, you're not left with no landscaping too.
Yeah, correct. The diversity is also really important.
Okay, so I think what we're trying to decide tonight is whether to, with a couple of changes, forward this to CROG, right?
I've already forwarded to CROG.
Oh, very good, okay.
In anticipation of you having some minor changes and nothing major, so we would be on track to take it to public hearing later this month if you wanted to.
Okay.
Just speaking of calendar, so in 2 weeks from now, we have several small applications, if you want to call them that we'd probably try to get all those on. And then in 4 weeks from now, we do have one zone change application that was submitted, and we would propose to do the text amendments that night as well.
Okay.
Kind of looking at your June agendas.
And Commissioner Dexter will have fun reading the legal notice for this.
I'm not really quite sure
And
how
you're
I'll
gonna have
word it,
fun,
but
right?
I'll be very creative. I'll send them to our webpage.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on this? Let's see. Do we have bonds?
No bonds, no.
Do we have any other old business?
No old business.
I make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously.